How insane is that looking? Absolutely incredible. Right, we are back with another absolutely epic resin art video. So many of you will remember back in hashtag 263, we made this absolutely crazy pendant. Now, one or two viewers put in the comments that it reminded them of a glass artist. His name is Jeremy Sinkus. I didn't know about Jeremy before somebody put that comment, and I've kind of fallen down a rabbit hole. His work is absolutely insane. If you're not following his work, he's on, I think, every platform. Just search his name. I'll put his Insta in the description box below. I'm blown away by his work. So this one is inspired by some of his pieces. I've got this octopus mold. Now, I actually bought this to try the hairspray technique because, well, you saw on my community tab, I shared another artist's work doing that, but I kind of had another idea. I've done this, and I'll show you the other piece once we've done this one. It is absolutely crazy. And we're going to be mixing things up. The main body is going to be made of epoxy. I'm going to use the collab resin. It's a little bit deeper than what I'd really use that epoxy for, but I'm sure it'll be okay. It's got quite a lot of, sides around it for the air. I don't think it's going to flash cure. I think we'll be fine. And then the rest of the design is going to be using UV resin. So let's get mixing. Right, I just run my epoxy through my vacuum chamber. I do want it as clear as possible. So I'm just going to fill up my mold. Now I've made sure that the mold's not completely full up. It's like a little dip, so we can top that up when this is cured with some magical stuff. Right, I'll see you when that's ready to pop out. Okay, it is now the following day. So here's where you have some options. You need to back this with something that's highly reflective, not just a standard mica powder. I don't even think a nail powder like an interference powder would do the trick. Use something like dichroic films or dichroic films. Use chameleon flakes. I've used chameleon flakes on the previous one. I'm going to do the same with this one just because it's quick and easy. So to get the chameleon flakes to adhere, obviously they're not going to stick to this because it's cured. If I'd have stayed in the studio later last night, I could have got to this probably when it was still tacky and given it a layer, but it was too late. So I am just going to fill this up a bit, flash cure it under my UV lamp, just to cure it enough so it's sticky for the chameleon flakes to adhere, and that will be a really reflective backing. But when I demold this, I'm going to have to make an alteration from the previous one that I made, and I'll show you why. So I'm just going to pour in some of my UV resin and then let most of it flow into the tentacles. And I might need to manipulate some of the resin by hand. Well, not with my fingers, of course. But with my stick. So just going to can't get my words out, it's too early. Move the resin into all of the points. Now this is the kind of project that you might want to do. Obviously it's a bit time consuming to make these to sell, but I think you could definitely sell them if you wanted to. But just make sure you try and cut this down to a speed that's quick and easy. I think the more you, well, I don't think I know, the more you do things, the quicker you get. But this is the kind of project that you might want to do for just something for home, and do it over a few sittings, like a few days. Just put a few hours or a couple of hours, an hour or two. I mean, it hasn't taken me so long, obviously, because we're only at this stage. So out comes the beast. I'm going to put this on a low wattage, 12 watts for about 30 seconds, then test it and just see if it needs a little bit longer. Because I do want the resin to be cured, but not 100% cured. So that's had that 30 seconds. And you can see it's firm enough to touch, but it's leaving these tiny dents, which is sticky. It means it's sticky enough for the chameleon flakes. Now, if you don't want the stress of getting chameleon flakes all over your mold and having to clean it out, now is the time to carefully demold it, but try not to touch that sticky resin. I'm just going to keep it in there. So I'm using the Let's Resin chameleon flakes. I'm going with a violet on this one. On the previous one, I'm going to show you afterwards, I went with the green. And we're just going to cover the whole base with our flakes. So you can see that really good adhesion. So I'm just going to go over all of it and just burnish it with the brush. And then just give it a quick thin top coat and cure that in place. I'm not going with a black or white background. Just keeping it with just the flakes. So that's the final layer of resin to seal that in. I'm going to give that a full power cure for a minute. Now I'm just going to make it a little bit easier. I'm just going to use some painter's tape just to remove any loose flakes from the mold. You can clean the rest up later. And we can now start to pop our octopus out of its mold. As always, massive shout out to my channel members, anyone who's bought me a coffee or a super thanks, and to all my subs. Thank you very, very much. Right. Pop his head out. And there we have it. So, I mean, it's pretty epic as it is. If you wanted to, it's up to you. You could UV the bottom again and do another layer, but it's just more time consuming. For this one, I'm just going to keep it as it is, but I do want to keep it translucent. It looks messy at the moment, and I know what you're thinking, a black background would be better. I mean, I might do it at the end just to see if there is a difference, because it loses that speckiness, but we are going to sand this down now, which is the time consuming part, especially with all of these intricate areas in here. Now, I've looked for a matte version of this mold, can't find it. I have been advised that the matte top coats that you get just flake away. It just peels off and flakes away, and I want this to last. I want it to be able to, you know, people to be able to hold it, to look at it without the worry of anything flaking off, etc. Now, what you will notice also is that the color doesn't really go through to the head area unless you tilt it right back. This is something I noticed on my trial run, so I'm going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to just file off the back of its head, so we've got a flat area. You can see if I place the end of my paintbrush just in that area there, it magnifies that, just the tip of the paintbrush, through the whole piece. So it doesn't need to be a large area, but I do need just a flat area here, so I can give it a thin coat of UV resin and brush it with the chameleon flake, same as what we did here, and just seal it in, so that will bounce that color also around the head area. So I filed down a bit of the back area. I'm not going to finish that part off yet. I'm just going to go with a 600 wet and dry and just wet it and sand over the whole piece. So I'm at around the 20-minute stage, and I tell you what, I'm having a much more pleasant experience than my prototype version, and I will explain that and the reasons. after. But when it comes to the areas here, just fold your sandpaper up and just get in between all the toes. Just try and, the more you sand it, the more refraction you are going to get. You can see the effect's really beginning to take form. Okay, so that took just over an hour. If you do have these kind of files, I didn't this time, but I did last time, you can just gently go inside these areas to make it a little bit easier, but it can leave quite heavy scratching. So now to stink oh dear. Now to stick with the Jeremy Sinkus vibe, and we are going to be adding some magnification onto the head area. To do that, I'm going to be using my cabochon mold, and I'm going to be using these two round ones here. I'm just going to be using UV resin, topping those up, not all the way, going to allow a slight dip on the surface, which will fit nicely onto the roundness of the head. So I'm going to make about, I don't know, about 10 of those. I'm hoping you can see the curvature of the surface, just like that. Okay, so for the next stage, we are going to be using some UV resin, and we're going to be gluing our small cabs onto the head area. Now, this again comes in really handy for jobs like this, because we can, sorry for the wobble, we can cure them in place and then move on and then give them all a big cure under the big lamp afterwards. So we have options on making molds of this. Just be careful, because obviously I don't know how it works with molds and the copyright side of things, but we are going to be altering it. The trouble is, I mean, we've got the matte finish that we want. We could make a mold of this now, but when it comes to making molds from resin, when you start adding UV resin, what can happen is when you use silicone with UV resin, it can actually, it won't cure. You'll get cure inhibition. So when you take the silicone, take the mold out of the silicone, it will be really sticky and not cured. That's because this is giving off, it's basically poisoning the silicone. So unless you was to make all of these out of epoxy and glue them on, then make a mold, I mean, I would just make a mold as it is. Once you've got your matte finish, maybe, I don't know. There are going to be options. Anyway, we are going to be, static can come into play here, so just, you know, bear that in mind. But don't worry, a bit of alcohol and some tissue will clean that off. So just a dab. You may not get it right first time. When I've done these in the past, I have trapped bubbles inside. It happens, but you can take them off and fix it before you cure them on. And any areas that seep out the sides, we can just sand that down afterwards. It's fine. This is why I've added these. Because you could be thinking, well, why didn't you add them and then sand the whole piece down? It's just easier this way. So I can now just check for bubbles on there. So any bubbles are going to be magnified. And then, oh, I keep knocking my camera arm. Forgive me. Just place that on the top. You see there's a bit of air in there. So I can push that down with my finger and then cure it. Just make sure your batteries in your torch are fully charged or fresh, and then we can let go of that and just give it a blast through. And again, like I said, any areas, you can just give it a light sand around the edges just to blend that in with the rest of the piece so it doesn't stand out. So I'm just going to go ahead and glue my bobbly bits all over the head. So I need to do a bit more sanding around the cabochons, but I'm about to do the back with the chameleon flakes, so just so you can see it before. Next comes the stage that is time consuming, I'm not going to lie, but I love this part. This is like art therapy. So I'm just dipping my stick into some UV resin, and all I'm doing is creating some dots just randomly. You might be thinking, Dan, you've got some patience, but wait till you see it afterwards. And again with my flashlight, I place a few dots, I part cure it, don't need to fully cure it, just to stop it from running, and then move on. I've got to do this 8 times, but it is good. Wait till you see it when it's done. I mean, how insane is that looking? Absolutely incredible. So once you've maybe done a couple of the tentacles, you could pop it under the big lamp just to make sure everything's all hard and then move on. So a little issue I've got, I was really hoping, don't worry, ignore the scratches, I'm going to buff those out. I was really hoping with this run that I'd get it spot on. So you see that patch that I did on the back? Now, if you're looking through that cabochon there, you can see just a patch of it. I think I've done it in the wrong place. If I put my finger underneath the back of the head here, you can kind of see better. So I'm going to have to, if I was to do this again differently, I would make a cabochon to fit in that area there so that it really bounces that light up, wedge it kind of in there as it's curing. I think that would have been the better option, but I can only try and better it because there's just not enough going on compared to the legs. I mean, this is supposed to be a focal area as well. You can see the color coming through, but it's just not, I mean, head on, I want to see more color. So I'm going to try and just get some chameleon flakes on that area there. It's not going to look brilliant. I could have covered that with another cabochon to hide it, but it's just playing around with it. I think if I can learn from this, then if you try it, you can obviously learn where I went wrong. Have you ever done something and then you're not quite sure whether you should have done it or not? Yeah. I'm not sure. It's allowing more colour to come through. It's not brilliant, but I'm gonna just carry on because I'm already committed. I can't just leave the rest. I'm just making a lot more work for myself. But how incredible is that looking now? I also just went over very, very thin coat. Is where I was trying to sand down the scratches that I made. I kind of touched some of the cabs. Whoops. Right, we're almost done. Okay, we're all done. So I'd say in total, that one has taken about 4.5 hours. I mean, how long is too long to spend on a piece of art? Is it worth it? What's the longest you've ever spent on one piece? Let me know in the comments. So this is the one that I made before. This was kind of the prototype. And whilst the legs look really nice, I went with a different kind of vibe on this one. I filed off the rounded tops of the cabochons. Now, the colours do show through really nicely. I was tempted to do it again with the one that we've just made. And this is very, very Jeremy Sinkus style with a flat. I mean, he does both. But, well, I mean, with this one, I really did. When I say I rushed it, I rushed it. You can see all the scratching. I didn't take time. This took me much, much longer because I went in with a high grit sandpaper and then I was just panicking because it was too much. I tried working down the grades. I really paid too much attention to every bit of glossy resin on this. It took me a lot longer, probably double the time that the one that we've just made. especially having to file all of these off as well. And I did this with UV resin. Now, I'm not saying go and fill a mold like that with UV resin. That's silly because it's very, very deep. I had to do this. I had to make a shell by tilting the mold with the head section, and then it took multiple layers. I was just being impatient and stupid. But it was just as a kind of trial run, really, to see if it would work. And it did. I mean, I think the colours might actually show through better on this one with the flat top. I don't know whether to try it with the other one. I might do it off camera afterwards. I don't know. So yeah, that was the kind of the trial piece to see if it would work. And it is pretty incredible. I'm going to show you the other one next. As always, give the video a thumbs up, drop me a comment. If you haven't subbed, hit that button for me. It is free. Okay, here we go. Now that is incredible. It's a lot neater. If I was to do it again, I'd just spend a bit more time with the sanding and the not rushing the cabochon placement, because I did make a bit of a mess. And that's a good thing about adding this dot work as well. It does hide some of the scratching, but the colours are insane. This is why I love chameleon flakes. And the colours are showing through the head. I mean, I'd rather not have to do that. It looks silly. I'd rather try again with a cabochon inside. Maybe at the back, facing forward, so that these lenses really do pop the colours through. But it is incredible. It took a long time, but I think it's worth it. It's one of a kind. You're never going to be able to, I'll never be able to make this exactly the same again. And I will definitely make another one, and I will try and simplify it and just make it a lot better. I might not do it as a video, but there are going to be more like this, smaller forms. I've got just arrived. I had to go and pick them up. These I'm going to do. These are already matte. These I'm going to do as seahorses. These are going to be absolutely incredible. I'll try and get that video up for Sunday. I've also got these ones, which I might try. I really want to try these small shells here. Again, I don't think I'm going to be able to do these with UV resin because of the type of mould. But what are the other ones? I only really bought them for these two here. I'll use the other ones for something. The bubbles are going to be a nightmare, but I think I can pop that in the vacuum chamber as it is to suck those bubbles out. But where's it gone? There it is. There it is. Jeremy Sinkus style octopus. Absolutely insane. I hope you enjoyed that one. Sorry if it was a bit long-winded. I don't expect everyone to go out and try this. If you are going to, just simplify it. Just make it a lot easier. But definitely, you know, on its own with the legs dotted is pretty incredible. I mean, you could even keep the head just shiny. It's entirely up to you. Right. I will see you for the next one. Bye for now.